He doesn't belong in first class, and I'm removing him." That was the sentence that ruined Sarah Miller's life. She stood in the aisle of Flight 490, arms crossed, smirking at the man in the hoodie, convinced she held all the power. The cabin was silent. Passengers held their breath. She thought she was exposing a fraud. She had no idea she was staring down the barrel of a federal investigation. The man she was humiliating wasn't just a passenger. He was the man sent to audit her airline. When the badge finally came out, it wasn't just an ID, it was a death sentence for her career. The rain at JFK Airport was relentless, hammering against the floor-to-ceiling glass of Terminal 4 like a drum roll for the headache already throbbing behind Adrian Thorne's left eye. He adjusted the strap of his leather duffel bag, his other hand firmly holding the small, warm hand of his 7-year-old daughter, Maya. Adrian looked nothing like his resume. Today, the 42-year-old was dressed for comfort, not command. He wore a charcoal grey hoodie, black joggers, and a pair of scuffed Jordans. To the untrained eye, he looked like a tired dad, maybe hoping for an upgrade. To the trained eye, however, the way he scanned the room, noting exits, assessing threats, watching hands, gave him away. But Sarah Miller, the lead flight attendant for Cloudbreak Airlines, had an eye trained only for judgment, not assessment. "Daddy, are we sitting in the big seats again?" Maya asked, her voice a sleepy whisper. She clutched a worn-out stuffed rabbit named Mr. Hops. "Yeah, baby girl." "The big seats," Adrian said, his voice a low, soothing rumble. "We're going to get some apple juice, and you're going to sleep the whole way to London." They approached the gate for Flight 492. The monitor flashed, "Boarding, first class and diamond members." Adrian walked toward the priority lane. The gate agent, a harried young man named Kevin, scanned Adrian's digital boarding pass without looking up. The machine beeped a pleasant green tone. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Thorne." "Seat 2A and 2B, Kevin mumbled. "Thanks," Adrian said. He walked down the jet bridge, the transition from the cool terminal to the stuffy, pressurized tube of the Boeing 787, familiar to him. He had spent half his life on planes, usually in the back, undercover, or sandwiched between two other agents. But today was personal travel. Or at least, that's what it was supposed to look like. As he stepped onto the aircraft, he turned left toward the first-class cabin. That was when he met Sarah Miller. Sarah had been flying for 20 years. She wore her seniority like a weapon. Her uniform was impeccable, her scarf tied in a severe knot that matched the tightness of her bun. She was standing by the galley, organizing champagne flutes with aggressive precision. She looked up as Adrian and Maya entered the exclusive cabin. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. It didn't even reach her cheeks. It was a muscle spasm of polite rejection. "Sir," Sarah said, her voice pitching up an octave, the universal tone of condescension. "Economy boarding is to the right, through the galley and down the second aisle." Adrian paused. He didn't blink. He just held up his phone, displaying the boarding pass again. "I know, we're in 2A and 2B. Sarah froze. She looked at the phone, then at Adrian's hoodie, then at Maya's messy hair, and finally back at Adrian's face. She didn't look at the screen. She looked through it. "May I see your physical ticket?" she asked, her hand extended, palm open. "I'm using the app," Adrian said calmly. "The gate agent just scanned it. It's valid." "Sometimes the app glitches," she lied smoothly. She took a step forward, effectively blocking the aisle. "I need to verify you're actually seated here. We have a full flight today, and these seats are reserved for our full-fare premium passengers." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Full fare, premium, words she clearly didn't associate with him. Adrian sighed, a long exhale through his nose. He tapped the screen, refreshing the QR code. "Sarah," he said, reading her gold name tag. "I'm tired. My daughter is tired. We are in 2A and 2B. If you need to check, you have the manifest on your tablet." "Don't tell me how to do my job, sir," she snapped. The professional veneer cracked instantly. "And keep your voice down. You are disturbing the first-class cabin." The cabin was empty, except for an elderly couple in row 1, the Vanderbilts, who were currently trying to figure out how to recline their seats and paying zero attention to the commotion. "I haven't raised my voice," Adrian said, his tone dropping even lower, cooler. "I'm going to sit down now." He gently maneuvered Maya around Sarah. Sarah gasped as if he had shoved her, though he hadn't made contact. "Excuse, you can't just—" she spluttered. Adrian settled Maya into 2B, helping her buckle the oversized seatbelt. He placed Mr. Hops on the console. Then he sat in 2A, dropped his bag in the overhead bin, and sat down. Sarah stood over him. Her face was flushing a blotchy red. She wasn't used to being ignored. She was the queen of the cabin, and this man in a hoodie had just committed regicide. "I'm going to check the manifest," she hissed, "and if you are not on it, I will have security escort you off this plane before the doors even close." "You do that," Adrian said, pulling a pair of noise-cancelling headphones out of his pocket. He didn't put them on yet. He wanted to hear this. As she stormed off toward the cockpit to grab her tablet, Maya looked at her father with wide, worried eyes. "Daddy, is the lady mad at us?" Adrian smiled, a genuine, warm smile that transformed his face. He reached over and squeezed her hand. "No, sweetie, she's just confused. Don't worry about it. Watch your movie." But Adrian wasn't watching a movie. He was watching Sarah, and he was memorizing everything. 10 minutes passed. The economy cabin was boarding, a stream of passengers shuffling past the first-class curtain. Every time someone walked by, they glanced at Adrian. He stuck out. In a sea of suits and blazers, he looked like he was heading to a gym. Sarah returned. She didn't have the tablet. She had backup. Another flight attendant, a younger man named David who looked terrified, trailed behind her. Sarah marched up to row 2. She didn't offer a pre-flight beverage. She didn't offer a hot towel. She offered an accusation. "Mr. Thorne," she said, the name as if it tasted sour. "I checked the manifest." "Great," Adrian said. "Then you know we're in the right seats. Can we get some water for my daughter?" "I know that the name Adrian Thorne is assigned to these seats," Sarah said, crossing her arms. "What I don't know is if you are Adrian Thorne." The cabin went quiet. The Vanderbilts in row 1 stopped fiddling with their seats. A businessman in 3A lowered his Wall Street Journal. Adrian slowly took off his headphones. The air in the cabin seemed to thin. "Excuse me?" "Identity theft is a serious issue with airline miles these days," Sarah said, her voice loud enough for the first 5 rows of economy to hear. "We've had a lot of incidents where people steal account logins and book tickets using other people's miles. You don't have a physical credit card on file that matches the booking." "I paid with a corporate card," Adrian said. "It's on file." "I need to see ID," she demanded. "Physical ID." "Now." "You are not the police, Sarah," Adrian said. "And the gate agent already checked my ID." "The gate agents are rushed and make mistakes," she retorted, playing to the audience of passengers who were now openly staring. "I am the lead flight attendant, and I am responsible for the safety and security of this aircraft. If you are flying under a false identity, that is a federal crime." "You want to talk about federal crimes?" Adrian asked, a strange glint in his eye. "ID," she repeated, holding out her hand, snapping her fingers impatiently. Adrian reached into his back pocket. He pulled out a slim, black leather wallet. He didn't open it to the badge section. Not yet. He pulled out his standard New York State driver's license. He handed it to her. Sarah snatched it. She held it up to the light. She squinted at it. She looked at the picture, then at Adrian. The picture was 3 years old. Adrian was clean-shaven in it and wearing a suit. "This is a fake," she announced triumphantly. "It is a valid New York State license," Adrian said. His patience was a fraying rope, but he held on to the end of it. "The laminate is peeling at the corner," she said, picking at the edge with a manicured nail. "And the hologram looks off. And frankly, you don't look like the man in this picture. This man looks like a professional." "I'm on vacation," Adrian said. "People dress down on vacation." "Not in my cabin," she muttered. She turned to David. "Go tell the captain we have a security breach. We have a passenger flying with fraudulent identification who refuses to deplane." "Sarah, maybe we should just scan it," David whispered, looking nervous. "He looks like the guy." "Do as I say," she snapped at him. "He's a fraud, David. Look at him. He's probably using a stolen credit card from some poor businessman. I'm not letting this plane take off with a criminal in row 2. She turned back to Adrian, a smug smile plastering her face. "I'm going to give you one chance to grab your bag and your child and walk off this plane. If you leave now, I won't call the police. You can go back to the terminal and sort this out." Maya started to cry. Silent tears rolled down her cheeks. She squeezed Mr. Hops so hard her knuckles turned white. That was the mistake. Adrian looked at his daughter. The calm, tired dad vanished. The air pressure in the cabin didn't change, but the gravity did. When Adrian looked back up at Sarah, his eyes were cold, dead weights. "I'm not going anywhere," Adrian said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a resonance that vibrated in the floorboards. "Call the captain. Call the police. Call whoever you want. But you better make sure you spell my name right on the report." Sarah laughed, a short, sharp bark of a laugh. "Oh, I will. I'll make sure they spell it right on the arrest warrant." She grabbed the cabin interphone. "Captain, we need law enforcement at the gate. Immediately. Row 2, level 4 threat." A level 4 threat, attempted hijacking or other life-threatening behavior. She had just escalated a ticket dispute to a terrorism charge. Adrian leaned back in his seat. He picked up his phone and sent a single text message. 2. Director H. Reynolds, FAA Oversight. Message. "It's happening. Flight 492, send the Port Authority, but tell them to wait for my signal." He locked the phone and placed it face down on the tray table. "You really shouldn't have done that," Adrian said softly. "Done what?" Sarah sneered, looming over him. "Lied," Adrian said. The sound of heavy boots hit the jet bridge. The wait was the worst part. It wasn't a long wait, perhaps only 4 minutes. But inside the pressurized tube of Flight 492, time seemed to curdle. The air conditioning hummed a low, monotonous note that grated against the nerves. The cheerful boarding music had been cut, replaced by a heavy, suffocating silence. Sarah Miller stood at the front of the cabin, guarding the cockpit door like a sentinel. Her chest heaved with performative adrenaline. She wasn't just a flight attendant anymore. In her mind, she was the first line of defense against a threat she had entirely fabricated. She caught the eye of the businessman in 3A and gave him a tight, brave nod, as if to say, "Don't worry, I've got this." The businessman just looked at his phone, his thumb hovering over the record button. Adrian sat perfectly still. He had moved his hand to Maya's knee, rubbing it in slow, rhythmic circles. "It's okay," he whispered, over and over. "Just some confusion. We'll be flying soon." Maya wasn't buying it. She had pulled her legs up onto the seat, curling into a ball, hiding her face in the fur of Mr. Hops. She was trembling. Adrian felt every tremor through his hand, and with every shake of his daughter's body, a cold, hard rage solidified in his gut. He wasn't angry anymore. He was calculating. Then came the sounds. The heavy thud of boots on the jet bridge, the squawk of a radio, the distinct clatter of equipment, utility belts, batons, handcuffs, hitting the narrow walls of the entryway. 2 Port Authority officers burst through the cabin door. They were keyed up, hands resting near their holsters, eyes scanning for a threat. Sarah had called in a level 4. That meant they were expecting a hijacker, a lunatic, someone violent. The lead officer, a thick-necked sergeant with a buzz cut and a name tag that read Kowalski, locked eyes with Sarah. "Where is he?" Kowalski barked. Sarah pointed a shaking finger at Siat 2A. "There, the man in the hoodie. He's refusing to identify himself. He's using a fake ID, and he became aggressive when I confronted him. He threatened the safety of the flight." Behind Kowalski was a younger officer, Ruiz, who looked more nervous. He had his hand on his taser. The 2 officers marched down the short aisle of first class. To them, the visual didn't quite match the intel. They saw a black man in casual clothes, sure, but he was leaning away from the aisle, shielding a small child. There was no weapon visible, no shouting. But police are trained to control the situation first and ask questions later, especially when an airline employee screams, "Threat." Kowalski stopped at row 2. He loomed over Adrian, blocking out the cabin lights. "Sir, I need you to keep your hands where I can see them," Kowalski commanded. His voice was a flat slab of authority. Adrian slowly lifted his hands, palms open, keeping them away from his body. "My hands are visible, Sergeant. I am unarmed. I am traveling with my 7-year-old daughter." "He's lying," Sarah interjected from behind the officers. She had crept closer, unable to stay away from the climax of the drama she'd orchestrated. "He tried to push past me. He's using a stolen identity. Look at him. He doesn't belong here." Kowalski glanced back at Sarah, then down at Adrian. The bias was already setting in. Sarah was the uniformed crew member. Adrian was the variable. "Sir, stand up and step out into the aisle," Kowalski ordered. "Officer," Adrian said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "If I stand up, my daughter is going to panic. She is already terrified. I am happy to show you my identification right here. I have a digital boarding pass and a valid New York license." "I told you to stand up!" Kowalski shouted. The de-escalation attempt had failed. Challenge a cop's authority in a high-stress environment, and the volume only goes up. "Daddy!" Maya whimpered. The sound was small and broken. "It's okay, Maya. Close your eyes," Adrian said, not looking away from Kowalski. "Last warning," Ruiz said, stepping up beside his sergeant, his hand gripping the yellow handle of the taser. "Get up, or we will remove you." Adrian assessed the distance. 2 feet. If they went hands-on, Maya would be in the middle of a scuffle. He couldn't risk that. He had to comply physically while fighting tactically. "Okay," Adrian said. "I'm standing up, slowly." He unbuckled his seatbelt. The click sounded like a gunshot in the silent cabin. He rose to his full height. Adrian was 6'2", taller than Kowalski. This shift in elevation changed the dynamic instantly. He wasn't looking up at them anymore. He was looking down. "Step out," Kowalski said, pointing toward the galley. Adrian stepped out of the pod-like seat, moving into the aisle. Sarah Miller smirked. She had won. She had humiliated him. He was being treated like a criminal. "Turn around and place your hands on the bulkhead," Kowalski said. "Am I under arrest?" Adrian asked. "You are being detained for interference with a flight crew and suspected fraud," Kowalski said. "Now turn around." Adrian didn't turn around. He stood his ground, planting his feet. "I am not turning around," Adrian said. "And I am not putting my hands on the wall. I have done nothing wrong. I have a frightened child 5 feet away. I am going to reach into my back pocket very slowly, and I am going to show you my wallet." "Do not reach for anything," Ruiz yelled. "He's got a weapon!" Sarah screamed, seizing the opportunity to escalate it further. "I saw a bulge in his jacket." The tension snapped. Kowalski lunged. The moment Kowalski's hand grabbed Adrian's shoulder, the dynamic in the cabin shifted from awkward to violent. Kowalski didn't just grab, he shoved. He tried to spin Adrian around, using a standard leverage takedown move designed to slam a suspect against the wall. It was a move that worked on drunks and unruly tourists. It did not work on Adrian Thorne. Adrian didn't fight back. That would be assaulting an officer. Instead, he became immovable. He dropped his center of gravity, grounded his feet, and simply didn't go where Kowalski pushed him. It was like trying to tackle a tree stump. "Get your hands off me," Adrian said. The volume of his voice hadn't risen, but the timbre had changed. It was the voice of a man who gave orders, not one who took them. "Stop resisting," Kowalski grunted, struggling to find a grip on the hoodie. "I am not resisting," Adrian said clearly, angling his body so the passengers and the phones that were now definitely recording could see he wasn't throwing punches. "I am asking you to stop assaulting a compliant passenger." "Compliant?" Sarah shrieked from the galley. "You refused to show ID. You threatened me." Kowalski released Adrian, realizing he couldn't physically move him without escalating to weapons. He stepped back, hand hovering over his baton. He was breathing hard. Adrian wasn't even winded. "Let's lower the temperature," Adrian said, looking directly at Kowalski, ignoring Sarah completely. "You are acting on bad information from a hysterical employee." "Watch your mouth," Kowalski warned. "Now for the last time. ID. If it's fake, you're going downtown in cuffs." "She has my license," Adrian gestured to Sarah. Sarah held up the license she had snatched earlier. "It's a fake. Look at it." She tossed it to Kowalski. The sergeant caught it. He looked at it. He rubbed his thumb over the laminate. He looked at the hologram. He frowned. It looked real. It felt real. But Sarah Miller, a senior flight attendant with 20 years of experience, was telling him it was fake. And Adrian, a black man in a hoodie in first class, fit the profile Kowalski had been subconsciously trained to suspect. "It looks questionable," Kowalski lied, siding with the victim. "The edges are rough, and the photo doesn't match the suspect." "I have a beard now," Adrian said dryly. "It happens." "It's not just the ID," Sarah said, walking forward, sensing the officer's hesitation. She needed to nail this coffin shut. "He doesn't have a credit card. He didn't check bags. Who buys a transatlantic first-class ticket, one way, with no bags, and pays with a corporate card he can't produce?" She turned to the passengers. "He's a drug mule, or worse." The whispers in the cabin grew louder. Drug mule. Terrorist. The label was sticking. "Officer," Adrian said, "I am going to ask you one time. Look at the name on that license. Adrian Thorne. Run it through your dispatch." "I don't need to run it," Kowalski said. "I'm taking you off the plane. We'll sort it out at the precinct. Grab the kid." He gestured to Ruiz. "Get the girl." Ruiz moved toward seat 2B. That was it. The line. Adrian stepped sideways, placing his body physically between Ruiz and Maya. The movement was so fast it was a blur, yet he ended in a non-threatening stance, hands still open. "Do not touch her," Adrian said. "Sir, step aside," Ruiz yelled. "You are making a mistake," Adrian said, his eyes locking onto Kowalski's. "A career-ending mistake. Both of you. And you." He looked at Sarah. "You are about to be blacklisted from the aviation industry for life." "Threatening an officer," Sarah yelled, That's assault! Tase him! Kowalski pulled his taser. The red dot appeared on Adrian's chest, right over the grey fabric of his hoodie. "Get on the ground!" Kowalski screamed. "Face down, now!" Maya screamed. "Daddy! Don't hurt my daddy!" The sound of his daughter's terror tore through Adrian. He knew he had about 3 seconds before 50,000 volts hit his system. He had played the game. He had tried to be the quiet passenger. He had tried to be the compliant victim. But they didn't want compliance. They wanted submission. "I am reaching for my wallet," Adrian announced, his voice booming now, filling the cabin. "My other wallet." "Don't do it," Ruiz yelled. "I am Federal Agent Adrian Thorne," he said, the words cutting through the chaos like a blade. "And I am reaching for my credentials." Kowalski hesitated. The word federal tends to make local cops pause. "Slowly," Kowalski breathed, keeping the taser aimed. "One finger." Adrian reached into his back left pocket, not the right, where the decoy wallet had been. He pulled out a black leather bifold. It was thinner than a standard wallet. He held it up. He flicked his wrist. The leather fell open. Gold flashed under the LED cabin lights. It wasn't the small shield of a local detective. It was a heavy, intricate medallion with an eagle at the top. Below the gold badge was a laminated ID card with a holographic strip that caught the light, shifting from blue to gold. Department of Transportation, Office of Inspector General Special Agent in Charge, Adrian J. Thorne. The cabin went silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop. "I am the Assistant Director of Field Operations for the FAA Oversight Committee," Adrian said, his voice ice cold. "I am currently conducting an audit of security protocols and discrimination practices for Cloudbreak Airlines." He looked at Sarah. Her face had gone the color of old milk. "And congratulations, Miss Miller," Adrian said, taking a step toward her as the officers lowered their weapons in shock. "You just failed the audit." He turned to Kowalski, whose mouth was slightly open. "Sergeant Kowalski," Adrian said, "you have a weapon pointed at a federal officer who identified himself and offered valid ID. I suggest you holster that taser before I have your badge on my desk by morning." Kowalski scrambled to holster the weapon. "Sir, usually, flight crew said." "The flight crew lied," Adrian said. "And you didn't investigate. You escalated." Adrian turned back to Sarah. She was trembling now, but not with power, with fear. "You wanted to see my ID," Adrian said, holding the badge inches from her face. "Read it. Out loud." Sarah couldn't speak. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. "Read it," Adrian barked. "Special Agent. In charge," she whispered. "Louder," Adrian commanded, "so the passengers you terrified can hear you." "Special Agent in charge," she squeaked. "That's right," Adrian said. He snapped the wallet shut. "Now, get the captain out here. I'm assuming command of this aircraft." The silence following Adrian's revelation was heavy, a physical weight that pressed against the eardrums of everyone in the first-class cabin. The only sound was the high-pitched whine of the aircraft's auxiliary power unit and the ragged, wet breathing of Sarah Miller. The cockpit door unlatched with a mechanical clunk. Captain James Sterling stepped out. He was a man cut from the old cloth of aviation, silver hair swept back, 4 gold stripes on his epaulets, and a face etched with the lines of 1,000 red-eye flights. He held his cap in his hand, his eyes scanning the scene with the weary precision of a man who just wanted to push back from the gate, not mediate a hostage situation. He saw the open cockpit door. He saw the 2 Port Authority officers, their weapons recently holstered, but their postures still radiating aggression. He saw Sarah Miller, pale and trembling, pressed against the galley wall. And finally, he saw Adrian Thorne. Adrian stood in the center of the aisle, holding his gold badge like a shield. He hadn't moved. He hadn't blinked. "What is going on here?" Sterling asked. His voice was a deep baritone, commanding but not shouting. "I was told we had a level 4 threat. I was told we had a passenger attempting to breach security." "You were misinformed, Captain," Adrian said. His voice was level, stripping the emotion away to leave only the raw, jagged facts. "What you have is a violation of Federal Statute 49, Section 46503, interference with a federal agent in the performance of official duties." Sterling looked at the badge in Adrian's hand. He leaned in slightly, his eyes narrowing as he read the inscription. The color drained from the captain's face, replaced by a grayish pallor. He knew that badge. Every pilot knew that badge. That badge meant the FAA wasn't just watching. They were here, inside the wire. "Agent Thorne," Sterling said, nodding respectfully. "I wasn't aware we had a VIP on board." "I'm not a VIP, Captain. I'm an auditor," Adrian corrected him. "And until 5 minutes ago, I was just a father trying to take his daughter on vacation. Now I am the lead investigator of an active crime scene on board your aircraft." Sterling turned to Sarah. The look he gave her was not one of support. It was the look a parent gives a child who has just burned down the garage. "Ms. Miller," Sterling said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Did you verify this man's identity before initiating a Level 4 protocol?" I tried, Captain," Sarah stammered. Her composure had disintegrated. She was grasping at straws, desperate to find a narrative that didn't end with her termination. "He was hostile. He refused to show physical ID. He was wearing that." She gestured vaguely at Adrian's hoodie. "He didn't look like a premium passenger. I was just trying to protect the flight." "She profiled me," Adrian interjected. "She ignored a valid digital boarding pass. She rejected a valid New York state license because she claimed the laminate was peeling. She publicly accused me of credit card fraud and drug trafficking in front of the passengers. And then," Adrian pointed a finger at Kowalski, "she lied to law enforcement, claiming I had a weapon, which led to a firearm and a taser being drawn on me and my 7-year-old child." Sterling looked at Kowalski. "Is this true? Did she say he had a weapon?" Kowalski shifted uncomfortably, his boots squeaking on the cabin floor. The bluster was gone. He was a man realizing he had been used as a pawn in a petty power trip. "She stated she saw a bulge in his jacket, Captain. We reacted to the intel provided by the flight crew." "There is no weapon," Adrian said. "Just a wallet and a stuffed rabbit." Sterling closed his eyes for a brief second, inhaling deeply through his nose. He was doing the math. On one side, his lead flight attendant, a woman he had flown with for a decade. On the other side, a federal agent, a terrified child, a cabin full of witnesses with smartphones, and a lawsuit that could bankrupt the airline. It wasn't really a choice. "Captain," Adrian said, delivering the final blow, "I am deeming this aircraft unsafe for operation under the current crew configuration. I have been harassed, threatened, and assaulted. I do not feel safe flying with Ms. Miller. She has demonstrated a lack of judgment that borders on criminal negligence." Adrian paused, letting the words hang there. "She goes," Adrian said. "Or we all go. And if we all go, I am arresting her right here on the jet bridge and impounding this plane for evidence." The ultimatum was absolute. Sterling looked at Sarah. There was no pity in his eyes anymore, only the cold calculation of command. "Ms. Miller," Sterling said, "gather your things." Sarah gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Captain, you can't be serious. I've been with Cloudbreak for 20 years. You're going to kick me off for him?" "I'm removing you from this flight for endangering the passengers and crew by fabricating a security threat, Sterling said, his voice rising just enough to cut off her protest. You are relieved of duty. David will take over as lead. You are to debark immediately. But now, Sarah, Sterling barked. The humiliation was total. Sarah Miller, who had marched into the cabin like a queen, now had to scurry into the galley. She grabbed her purse and her rolling suitcase. She didn't look at Adrian. She couldn't. She kept her head down, her face a mask of blotchy red shame. As she walked past row 2, dragging her bag, the sound of the wheels on the carpet was a harsh, rhythmic rasp. Ms. Miller, Adrian said softly as she passed. She stopped. She didn't turn, but she stopped. The name is Thorne, he said. Make sure you spell it right for your union rep. She fled the plane. Sterling turned to the police officers. Gentlemen, I think your services are no longer required. Agent Thorne is cleared. Kowalski nodded, looking at his boots. Sorry for the confusion, Agent. It wasn't confusion, Sergeant, Adrian said, not letting him off the hook. It was bias. We'll be discussing that later. The police left. The captain looked at Adrian. Agent Thorne, I sincerely apologize. We will do everything to make the rest of this journey comfortable for you and your daughter. I'll have the gate agent bring down a replacement attendant immediately. We'll be delayed about 20 minutes. Just fly the plane, Captain, Adrian said, sitting down. We just want to go to London. Sterling nodded, turned, and disappeared back into the cockpit. Adrian sat down. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a shake in his hands that he hid by gripping the armrests. He turned to look at Maya. She was staring at him, eyes wide, tears drying on her cheeks. She looked at him, not just as her dad, but as something else, something giant. Are the bad men gone, Daddy? She whispered. Adrian unbuckled his seatbelt and pulled her into a hug, burying his face in her hair, to hide the moisture in his own eyes. Yeah, baby, he choked out. The bad men are gone. Nobody is going to hurt you. I promise. The heavy, pressurized door of the Boeing 777 thudded shut, sealing the cabin from the rest of the world. For most passengers, that sound signaled the beginning of a vacation or a business trip. For Adrian Thorne, it sounded like the closing of a cell door, but this time, he was the warden, and the airline was the prisoner. The transition from the chaos of the gate to the sterile luxury of the air was jarring. The aircraft pushed back, the engine spooling up with a deep, resonant vibration that rattled the ice in the pre-departure beverages. The cabin lights dimmed to a soothing blue, a stark contrast to the harsh, fluorescent reality of the last 30 minutes. A new flight attendant, a young woman named Chloe, appeared at row 2. She had been pulled from standby in a panic, briefed only that the previous lead had mishandled a VIP. She didn't know the details, but she could smell the tension. It hung in the air like ozone after a lightning strike. Mr. Thorne, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly as she held out a warm towel with tongs. She treated him not just with respect, but with fear. Captain Sterling asked me to ensure you have everything you need. He sends his regards. Adrian took the towel. It was steaming hot, smelling of lemon and lavender. He wiped his hands, scrubbing away the invisible residue of Sergeant Kowalski's grip and Sarah Miller's accusations. Thank you, Chloe, Adrian said, his voice low. We just need quiet. Of course, sir. Absolutely. She backed away, bowing slightly. Terrified of making a mistake, Adrian turned to Maya. The resilience of children never ceased to amaze him. 10 minutes ago, she had been sobbing in terror. Now, tucked into the lie-flat seat with a cashmere blanket and Frozen playing on the 18-inch screen, she was in another world. She had compartmentalized the trauma, or perhaps she just trusted her father that much. The bad men are gone. He had promised her. But the bad men weren't gone. They were just hiding behind corporate logos and union contracts, and Adrian wasn't done with them. As the plane climbed through the cloud layer, breaking into the blinding orange light of the sunset, Adrian didn't recline his seat. He didn't order champagne. He reached into his leather duffel and pulled out his government-issued laptop. It was a matte black tough book, scarred from field assignments, thicker and heavier than the sleek MacBooks the other passengers were using. He plugged a biometric security key into the USB port. He pressed his thumb against the scanner. A green light blinked. Access granted. .OIG, secure link. He wasn't connecting to the plane's public Wi-Fi. He was tunneling directly into the Department of Transportation's oversight servers via a dedicated satellite uplink. He wasn't a passenger anymore. He was a remote command post. He opened a fresh file. The cursor blinked on the blank white screen, a rhythmic pulse waiting for his input. Incident report. Class A. Civil rights violation. Location, JFK T4. Flight 492. Subject, Cloudbreak Airlines primary aggressor. Miller, Sarah, employee ID pending. Adrian began to type. His fingers moved with the precision of a pianist playing a requiem. He documented everything. The timestamp of his arrival. The specific verbiage Sarah had used. You don't belong here. People like you. He noted the refusal to inspect the digital boarding pass, a direct violation of FAA electronic ticketing protocols. He detailed the escalation to law enforcement without probable cause. He was deep in the section regarding color of law abuses when he sensed a presence looming over him. It wasn't Chloe. The cologne was expensive, sandalwood and old money. Adrian paused, his hands hovering over the keyboard. He slowly turned his head. Standing in the aisle was the man from seat 3A, the businessman who had been reading the Wall Street Journal. He was in his late 50s, silver-haired, wearing a bespoke navy suit that probably cost more than Adrian's entire undercover wardrobe. He held a crystal tumbler of scotch in one hand and a business card in the other. "Mr. Thorne?" the man asked. His voice was hushed, respectful. "It's Agent Thorne," Adrian corrected, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Can I help you?" The man nodded, looking around to make sure the flight crew wasn't listening. "I'm Robert Henderson. Bob, I'm a senior partner at Henderson and Wright." Adrian knew the name. It was one of the top corporate litigation firms in Manhattan. They defended Fortune 500 companies. They were sharks. "I know the firm," Adrian said, his guard staying up. "You representing the airline?" "God, no," Bob said, a look of genuine disgust crossing his face. "I'm not here as a lawyer. I'm here as a witness." He placed the business card on Adrian's tray table. Then he placed his iPhone next to it. "I saw what happened," Bob continued, leaning in closer. "I've been flying this route for 15 years. I've seen bad service. I've seen rude staff. But I have never seen anything like that. That woman, she was hunting you." Adrian looked at the man. He saw something in Bob's eyes that surprised him. Guilt. The guilt of a man who had sat comfortably while someone else was persecuted and was now trying to make amends. "I appreciate that, Bob," Adrian said. "I didn't just see it," Bob whispered. "I recorded it." The air between them seemed to electrically charge. "You recorded it?" "From the moment she asked for your physical ticket," Bob confirmed. "I had my phone propped up against my water glass. She didn't see it. I got the whole thing. The accusation, the way she sneered at your daughter, the way she lied to the cops about the weapon." Adrian felt a cold chill run down his spine. Eyewitness testimony was good. A sworn affidavit from a federal agent was better. But video was the nuclear option. Video stripped away the he said, she said defense. Video made it undeniable. "Show me," Adrian said. Bob unlocked his phone and tapped the screen. He handed the device to Adrian. Adrian put on his headphones. He pressed play. Watching the video was a different kind of trauma. Living it had been about survival. Watching it was about processing the indignity. On the small OLED screen, the scene played out with sickening clarity. He saw himself, calm, patient. He saw Sarah, posture aggressive, finger-pointing, face twisted in a mask of superiority. He heard Maya's voice. "Daddy, is the lady mad at us?" The sound of his daughter's fear, captured in high definition, cut through Adrian like a knife. He watched the moment the police boarded. He watched Sarah lie. "He has a weapon. I saw a bulge." It was a felony. Perjury. Filing a false police report. Reckless endangerment. Adrian took off the headphones. His hands were shaking just slightly. He took a deep breath, forcing the rage back down into the furnace of his resolve. "Can you airdrop this to me?" Adrian asked. "Already ready," Bob said. A moment later, the file transferred. img4922.mov, a 400-megabyte file that was about to cost Cloudbreak Airlines millions of dollars. "I'm willing to testify," Bob said, taking his phone back. "If they try to bury this, and they will try, you call me. I'll go on the record. Pro bono. I don't like bullies, Agent Thorne, and I really don't like racists." "Thank you, Bob," Adrian said, extending his hand. "I might take you up on that." Bob shook his hand firmly, then retreated to 3A, leaving Adrian with the smoking gun. Adrian turned back to his laptop. He wasn't just writing a report anymore. He was building a coffin. He attached the video file to the case record. Then he opened his email client. He didn't use the standard interdepartmental routing. He went straight to the top. To Reynolds, Henry, Inspector General, CC, Civil Rights Division, DOJ. Subject, urgent priority, Alpha, Agent Endures, systemic failure, he typed furiously. Director Reynolds, as of 18 hours EST, I have initiated an emergency audit of Cloudbreak Airlines security protocols. During transit on Flight 492, I was subjected to racial profiling, harassment, and an illegal detainment attempt by local law enforcement, instigated by false statements provided by the lead flight attendant. I have video evidence of the crew fabricating a weapon threat to justify a Level 4 removal of a federal officer and a minor child. This is not an isolated incident. This is a training failure and a cultural failure. I am recommending the immediate suspension of Cloudbreak's trusted partner status with the TSA, pending a full civil rights investigation. Subpoena their logs. I want to know how many other hoodie-wearing passengers Sarah Miller has removed in the last 10 years. I am not just an auditor today, Henry. I am a victim, and I am bringing the hammer down. Thorne. He hit send. The message encrypted, broke into data packets, shot up to a satellite 22,000 miles above the Earth, and beamed down to a secure server in Washington, D.C. The fuse was lit. But Adrian knew how bureaucracy worked. It was slow. Investigations took months. Lawyers would get involved. They would try to settle. They would try to make him sign a non-disclosure agreement. He looked out the window. The sky was now a deep, bruised purple. The stars were coming out. He needed insurance. He needed to make sure this couldn't be swept under the rug. He stood up and walked to the galley. Chloe jumped as he approached. "Sir, can I get you anything?" "Just the phone," Adrian said, pointing to the satellite handset mounted on the wall. "I need to make a secure call." "Oh, of course," she said, practically pressing herself against the oven to give him space. Adrian lifted the handset. He swiped his personal Amex. He dialed a number he had memorized years ago, a number that belonged to a man who had won a Pulitzer for exposing corruption in the NYPD. The line rang. Once, twice. "News desk, Mike speaking," a groggy voice answered. It was late in New York. "Wake up, Mike," Adrian said, his voice hard as iron. "Who is this?" "It's Adrian Thorne." There was a pause, the rustle of sheets. The tone on the other end sharpened instantly. "Adrian, I haven't heard from you since the Port Authority sting. What's wrong?" "I'm at 38,000 feet, Adrian said. "I'm on a cloud-break flight to London, and I have a story that is going to clear your front page for tomorrow." "I'm listening," Mike said. "How would you like a video of a senior flight attendant trying to swat a federal agent and his 7-year-old daughter because she didn't like the way he dressed?" "You're kidding," Mike breathed. "I have the video," Adrian said. "I have the badge number of the cop who pointed a taser at my kid, and I have the flight manifest." "Send it," Mike said. "I'll wake the editor." "I'm sending it now," Adrian said. "Mike, burn them down." He hung up the phone. The cabin was silent, save for the hum of the engines. Adrian walked back to his seat. He looked at Maya, fast asleep, clutching Mr. Hops. He gently pulled the blanket up to her chin. The investigation had begun. The legal system was in motion. The press was alerted. Sarah Miller had wanted a reaction. She had wanted to show him who was in charge. Adrian closed his laptop. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes. She has no idea, he thought. She just picked a fight with the whole damn government. The story didn't just break, it detonated. By the time Flight 492 touched down at Heathrow, the video Bob Henderson had recorded was already the #1 trending topic on Twitter, X. The hashtag #OsterFirstClassWhileBlack was generating 10,000 posts a minute. The image of Sarah Miller sneering at a terrified 7-year-old girl contrasted with the image of Adrian Thorne calmly holding up his federal badge became the defining meme of the year. But for Sarah Miller, the internet fame was only the first wave of the tsunami. 3 days later, Cloudbreak Airlines held a press conference. They didn't just fire Sarah, they publicly disavowed her. The CEO, looking pale and sweaty, announced that Sarah Miller had been terminated for gross misconduct and violation of federal anti-discrimination laws. But the corporation couldn't save itself by sacrificing a pawn. Adrian Thorne didn't sue for money. He sued for change. Represented by Bob Henderson, who took the case pro bono, Adrian filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against Cloudbreak. The discovery phase was brutal. Adrian's team subpoenaed Sarah's employment history and found a pattern. She had a history of randomly checking the IDs of minority passengers at a rate of 400% higher than white passengers. Cloudbreak had known. And Cloudbreak had done nothing. The karma hit Sarah in waves. First, she lost her job. Then, she lost her pension. Because she was terminated for cause involving a federal investigation, her union couldn't save her benefits. 20 years of savings evaporated. But the hardest hit came 6 months later. Adrian sat in a quiet courtroom in the Southern District of New York. He wasn't in a hoodie this time. He was in his full dress uniform, his gold badge gleaming on his chest. Beside him sat Maya, now 8, drawing quietly in a sketchbook. Sarah was there too. She looked 10 years older. Her hair was unkempt, her face gaunt. She couldn't get a job. No airline would touch her. No customer service agency would hire her. She was the Cloudbreak lady, a social pariah. She had been evicted from her apartment 2 weeks prior, a detail that came out during the sentencing for the civil charges. The judge looked down at Sarah. "Ms. Miller," the judge said, her voice echoing in the mahogany chamber. "You didn't just inconvenience a passenger. You weaponized the police against a father and child. You exploited the post-9/11 security apparatus to enforce your own personal prejudices. That is not just a policy violation. It is an act of malice." The judgment was severe. Sarah was ordered to pay punitive damages that she would never be able to afford, essentially ensuring she would be in debt for the rest of her life. But the real blow was the federal ban. The judge signed an order placing Sarah Miller on the no-fly list and permanently barring her from obtaining any employment that required federal security clearance. She wouldn't just never fly as a stewardess again. She would never even step foot in an airport again. As the bailiff led her out, she looked across the aisle at Adrian. For the first time, she didn't look down on him. She looked up. She opened her mouth, perhaps to apologize, perhaps to beg. Adrian didn't look away. He didn't smirk. He didn't gloat. He simply looked at her with a profound, heavy pity. He nodded once, a gesture that said, "I hope you learned." Then he turned to his daughter. "Come on, Maya," Adrian said, standing up. "Let's go home." "Are we flying, Daddy?" she asked. "Yeah, baby," he smiled. "But this time, I think we'll take the train." Outside the courthouse, the paparazzi were waiting. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions. Adrian ignored them all. He walked through the crowd, holding his daughter's hand, a man who had stood his ground and watched the world shift beneath his feet. He had proven that dignity isn't something you buy with a first-class ticket. It's something you carry inside you, and woe to the person who tries to take it away. That is the story of Adrian Thorne and Sarah Miller. While this specific narrative is a dramatization, the reality it depicts is something thousands of people face every single day. We live in a world where snap judgments are made based on appearance, clothing, or skin color, rather than character. Sarah Miller thought she was protecting the plane, but she was really just protecting her own ego. She forgot the most important rule of her job. Hospitality means making everyone feel welcome, not just the people who look like you. In the end, her bias cost her everything: her career, her reputation, and her future. Adrian Thorne showed us that true power isn't about shouting or making threats. It's about knowing who you are, staying calm in the face of injustice, and protecting the ones you love. If this story made your blood boil, or if you were cheering for Adrian at the end, hit that like button right now, so we know to bring you more stories like this. I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever been judged or treated unfairly because of how you looked or dressed? Tell me your story down below. I read every single comment. And if you want to see more karma hitting back instantly, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell. You do not want to miss the next story. Thanks for watching, and remember, never judge a book by its hoodie.